we're in conversation with the very controversial Tariq Ghafoors. Now, in 1989, you were superintendent and then assistant chief constable for Lancashire. In 1999, you were deputy chief constable, then deputy assistant commissioner for the Met, and then finally assistant commissioner. What was the highlight of your career?
Well, the highlight of my career was coming to London. I'll tell you why, because I had worked in Manchester, which is a very big police force.
Yeah.
I'd worked in Leicestershire, which was a small county force. I'd worked in Lancashire, which was a mid-sized force. So I'd had a lot of kind of county type, but to come to a major city like London. And when I came here, I became the commander in charge of Westminster.
Yes.
Now here where all the state institutions are.
Yes, of course.
It is the biggest policing area in the country. To become a deputy assistant commissioner in charge of policing Westminster, I thought that was kind of, absolutely fantastic, really.
Now, how does a police officer learn to deal with the horrors and the abuse of what you see while you're policing?
Well, I think police officers become quite hardened in time because they see the worst things, they see the good things. And sometimes what happens is that, as a kind of a way of dealing with these things, humor becomes quite a good safety valve.
Because you see some pretty horrific things, don't you? Especially when it comes to child abuse or rape or murder.
Yes.
It must be difficult.
Yeah, it is difficult, but I think what happens is you depersonalize it. And you almost emotionally, put a blank towards it. And your job is to get these people and these perpetrators who commit these horrific crimes to justice. So there is a mission in terms of that. And I've seen, some incredible investigations where people have actually, worked days, hours, months sometimes to make sure that, the people who committed these horrendous crimes. But I think privately, it takes quite a toll on you.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
In the sense that, you keep seeing it, and you become hardened and hardened by it. And sometimes, one of the greatest fears we had as senior police officers was that, this sort of constant, negativity that you actually see, must have quite a very strong psychological impact on people. So we have learnt in UK, that officers who deal with these kind of incidents have to be critically debriefed. So we sometimes do critical incident, it's called critical incident debriefing, where we bring psychologists in and others to kind of ensure that, they do not suffer from what is called post-traumatic stress.
Yes, of course.
But I'm afraid, it does affect some people and never recover from it. Their family life actually suffers. They often then get into either, start or into alcohol abuse, etc. Not
as a coping mechanism.
As a coping mechanism, and I think it's tough on them. But we try as leaders, good leaders, try to see if we can kind of minimize that.
Did you ever get emotionally involved in a case?
Well, to be honest, I spent all my time extremely emotionally involved with communities. And if I, many a times, even now, see that a vulnerable person, whether it is a child or elderly person or people or communities being taken advantage of, then I'm steadfast in terms of ensuring that we do everything possible to ensure those people who commit these crimes are brought to justice. So I used to oversee many cases where, frankly, yes, I was emotionally attached, but from point of view of making sure that we professionally do a job and do what we have to do is to bring these people to justice. And sometimes, the justice was not handed out to these people because they got off it with a technicality, or sometimes they were able to afford a huge amount of money to pay the lawyers. But I think, of course you do. But what you can't do as a police officer is think that you're going to get into retribution and take the law into your own hand.
Has policing changed over the years? Do you feel that perhaps it's become more bureaucratic and more politically correct?
Yeah, I have some views, and perhaps it's because I'm getting older. But I always kind of had a couple of issues about policing. One is that safety and security in communities should be a neutral agenda. It should, everybody wants to feel safe in their homes.
Yeah.
When they travel, when they're in crowded places, they want to feel safe. Doesn't matter what background you are, and sometimes you're vulnerable as well. But I'm afraid, what has seemed to have happened is that the policing has become too political sometimes.
You have in the past criticized or commented on Commissioner Ian Blair that he has politicized the force by putting it into the pocket of New Labour.
Yeah, I think politically, politicizing of policing is very dangerous, because what happens is then that the political masters define what you're going to do, the consequence of which is that you ignore a whole range of other things. And I think the notion of political correctness...
So you become like a cooperation.
Well, of course you are. But that you look at the bottom line, you're going to deal with certain things. But security is not like that. Security in community is that in some communities the dangers may be different to another community. And sometimes the dangers are from within. Now you have to tackle those particular dangers. And I'm afraid, just pursuing narrow targets and not looking at the understanding the complexity of what is happening. And I think some of what I've said has come home to roost, because the recent riots were never ever predicted.
Yes.
The communities were changing.
Yes.
And consequently what happened is that effectively, when it happened, you had looting with disorder, with the speed at which people were able to mobilize and commit the kind of crimes they did, caught everybody, entirely by surprise.
You spoke against the radicalization of Islam and encouraged communities to weed out extremism in the community. Did that make you unpopular in certain religious factions?
No, but because, on one hand, promoting an open dialogue like that with the communities does make you unpopular. There are certain people who say, well, hang on, you are wearing the institution uniform, so you are speaking on behalf of them. But equally, I was very strongly against 42 days detention.
Yes, you were. I was going to mention that.
I was extremely against it, and because I didn't see any operational reason for it, so I was quite challenging in that aspect. After 7/7, when we had the bombings in London, I think at that time there was a lot.
There must have been a difficult time for you as a Muslim. Asian police officer.
Oh, it was personally and professionally very difficult time, in the sense that on two fronts. One is that after 7/7, I was literally working 24 hours a day and not seeing, my kids, not seeing my family. So of course that created, issues. And secondly, as a police officer from a Muslim background, there was pressure. There was a pressure on me in terms of, how do we make sure that, there is not a backlash against our communities. And to a small time, there was a backlash.
Yes.
And I was open about talking about it. So sometimes as a leader, you have to be brave, and one of the reasons I've been popular with the public is because I don't just make sound bites. I'm able to discuss serious issues.
And you speak your mind.
And speak my mind. And sometimes, that doesn't go down very well.
Yes.
But I'm afraid, that's what you are. You're a community person who's working in an institution. But, you have to act professionally, and that's what I've done. And some people like it, some not. But overall, the feedback that I always got was pretty positive, to be honest, from the communities.
But how serious is the growing issue of fundamentalism and extremism in Britain today?
Well, people being fundamental in their views, or even being radical, or even being strong-minded in a democracy should not be a problem. Should not be a problem. I think, open speech, free speech is allowed. The problem is that when that radicalization or that extremism, then is exploited to a point where a person tips over, a tipping point, and then starts to commit the kind of atrocities that were committed here in 7/7, and the kind of atrocities people who are in jail were going to commit, which is mass murder, putting everything aside, then I think that...
But the question is to find out when do they reach that tipping point?
Well, That's a very good question, because what happened is that nobody understands exactly what are the reasons, exact reasons. There's a lot of speculation, there's a lot of information. People think what are the reasons when people reach those particular tipping points. And I always called for judicial examination of this, in terms of a proper judicial examination in terms of why did people do what they did and why they came from certain communities, but those examinations never took place. We had those sort of examinations in 1981 when we had the riots, but we never got that, and there was a political decision not to do that, because I suspect that one of the reasons why people felt the anger, I mean, inevitably there were certain people who had contaminated young people and were trained overseas to do that. But in other cases,
I mean, it's quite common. I know a lot of people who've been approached in universities myself.
Exactly. In other cases, there was a lot of anger about, foreign policy, various other aspects. Anger creates vulnerability.
Yes.
Vulnerability, if exploited by, people with, intentions to do what happened here in 77, then that would, but there has been no real empirical judicial examination, so I think we can only speculate, and some of the speculations and theories have actually not been borne out, by subsequent incidents that have occurred in many ways. So I think, it's a very difficult issue. It's but one of the ones which I try and profess to communities is that we must take shared responsibility. The authorities can only do so much, and we have to find ways in which we actually put our young people and others on the right path.
Do you feel that you were being ambushed?
Oh, absolutely.
Did you marry for love the first time?
No. I am absolutely sure that the men were institutionally racist.
Do you feel that when you're in a position of power and you have a uniform that, the ladies are attracted?